Hey everybody, Chris Matan here, Real Estate Machine Show. We're going to talk multifamily. We're going to talk about problems getting a multifamily transaction across the finish line. There are two major pieces that I want to talk about that have been huge talking points on getting these deals done. I suppose this can translate to all real estate, commercial real estate, but I'm seeing it really specifically in the multifamily and apartment building space. Not coincidentally, I'm sitting in front of here some main shutoffs to the power coming into the building that fan out throughout the property here for electrical service. And electrical service, fuses, breakers, all of the stuff that surround that on an apartment building has become a major talking point, not only for insurance companies, but for lenders. And the gist of it is that lenders and insurance companies don't like fuses. Now, lenders and insurance companies are not professional electricians, but at the same point, they're trying to protect their property. There's an argument out there that maybe fuses are not as safe as circuit breakers. I am not an electrician, but I'm willing to bet that if you put a couple of two electricians in the room, one will say circuit breakers or fuses are fine. They're just as good as circuit breakers. And then the other one will say the circuit breakers are better. So, I don't know the science behind the whole thing. All I do know is that when people see fuses, it's a red flag, and all of a sudden everybody gets all excited and starts renegotiating and decreasing value on a property because the electrical panels have fuses as opposed to circuit breakers. So what does that mean? That means that it means a couple things, really. It means that all of a sudden in the mindset of the buyer, the property's worth less. It's going to cost more to insure. It's going to cost them in the future to replace those fuse boxes with breaker panels. And, it may then reduce the pool of buyers because there's going to be buyers out there that are going to refuse to buy apartment buildings because they have fuses in it, right? I guess that's a possibility. Now, insurance companies are altogether, kind of shying away from the apartment building business. I don't know if this is the reason or if it's just because it's become a little bit harder to operate these properties. Vacancy rates, I don't know. I don't know what the logic is with insurance companies at all. I think the insurance business is absolutely broken and criminal for that matter. But anyway, you're seeing insurance rates skyrocket to the point of devaluing property because it's affecting the net income so much. And you add in the fact that now these insurance companies and lenders in particular are demanding that fuse boxes and fuses are replaced with modern circuit breaker boxes, which could cost $500 to $800 per unit, depending on your market. It's a meaningful discussion to have with your seller ahead of time. As a broker, as an agent that sells these buildings, I like to have at least the conversation going in to say, hey, look, this is a great building. You make nice money here. It's very clean. You've got all these upgrades. However, this is what's going to be discussed. For all of the beauty around this, they're going to zero in on the stupid fuse box that I'm going to have a hard time insuring it, and I'm going to have a hard time getting financing on it. They're going to demand that I put money in escrow to make sure that it's all going to get replaced. So if you go in knowing that, you might have a better go of it throughout the marketing process and transaction in of itself. If there's any possibility that your seller has the wherewithal to make those changes. Now, look, if you have a 6-unit apartment building that's 6 fuse boxes, that's not that dramatic. If you have 60 units or 600 units, now you're all of a sudden talking big money. And that's where the issue comes in. Who wants to spend that money? And do you automatically take a decrease in value because of that? Or do you automatically write off the property because you can't get it financed or you can't get it insured? So anyway, major talking point that people are are having around multifamily and insurance rates. So my advice on that is to just make sure that the seller is absolutely aware that this is a topic that very well could come up. It could come up during negotiation. It could come up during contract. It could come up during financing, which, sometimes you don't deal with with the finality of the financing until the 11th hour. And then the 11th hour comes along and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, I need $100,000 in escrow so that all these circuit breakers are going to be, all these fuse boxes are going to be replaced with circuit breakers. So anyway, insurance and, more importantly, electrical panels is issue number one. Issue number two is tax proration. I'm working on a deal right now where we've been negotiating one paragraph in a 38-page contract all around the tax proration. And, for those of you who don't know, most people that are going to be watching this are going to be somewhat familiar of what the tax proration is on a settlement statement when you close a real estate transaction. Now, in most counties, I'm going to say across the country, there's, the way that they establish what the property tax is that there's an assessed value that the county comes up with. There's a tax rate, and then you kind of do the math, and that comes up with your tax bill. But there's reassessments that happen every so often, depending on the county and area that you're in. It could be every 3 years, it could be every 6 years. So what that means is that property taxes goes up. They go up, and a lot of times in the majority of the areas that I work, taxes are paid in arrears, which means that in 2025, when you pay a tax bill, that tax bill that you're paying for is actually the 2024 bill. So when you're closing a sale, you got to take into consideration how much the taxes that were paid, when they were paid, for what year they were paid, and the time of ownership during the year that you close, that that there's an amount of money that's set aside that's a credit or a debit on the closing statement, so that everybody is able to pay those taxes and get reimbursed for the taxes that they've already paid. So the issues come up with how do you, if there's a new valuation for a bill that's coming up, are you savvy enough to look at that as the amount that you're going to prorate on? Or are you going to prorate on the most recent ascertainable tax bill? Are you appealing those taxes? Have your taxes gone up 50, 60, 70%, so you've hired a lawyer to reduce those taxes? That's a process. And that process sometimes starts before you sell a property, and you're in the middle of negotiating a tax proration, and who's going to pay for that tax appeal attorney? And how is that going to get paid? And do you agree? Do you believe that you have any leg, as a buyer, do you believe that the seller has any leg to stand on to have their taxes reduced in the first place? So all those things come up all of a sudden during you write a letter of intent. And the letter of intent highlights and outlines the basic terms, the price, the earnest money, the due diligence time, the financing, maybe some of the closing costs and stuff like that. But it doesn't get into the nitty gritty of legal language surrounding a tax proration. So that's another topic that should be discussed with your client. Whether you're representing a buyer or a seller, it's going to affect the bottom line on a closing statement and settlement statement. So to understand and to really dial in what you want and what's the best process moving forward for your client, I would almost argue to put that in a letter of intent so it's absolutely clear. But again, legal language sometimes gets misunderstood, it gets misarticulated, and you get people digging their heels in for the word "the," and it just bottlenecks everything. And like I said, I just finalized a contract that we were literally going round and round and round over a tax proration for. The contract was put out mid-June, and we just finalized it this week. So way too long, totally unreasonable. And but again, I think sometimes it comes down to kind of good communication, poor communication, who's communicating, and fear, maybe some fear along the way too, or trust issues. But anyway, I'm going to sign off on those two issues. You've got fuse boxes and, coupled with insurance and financing issues related to that. And then you've got the tax proration to hammer out during the contract negotiation. So keep in mind those two things when you're buying and selling and brokering apartment building deals and commercial real estate. I think those are, in this day and time, that's almost more important than the price. Sometimes the price and terms, anybody can negotiate price and terms, but once you get into these other two items, it can just blow up a deal real early. So set those expectations early on and get your deals closed. Have a great day, everybody.